Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Primary Industries, the Honourable Niall Blair. As Minister responsible for animal welfare, what is your response to a Sydney Morning Herald article of the 13th of November which relied on a Department of New South Wales Environment report which revealed that your government's plans to raise the height of the Warragamba Dam would have adverse impacts on threatened species such as the regent honeyeater and eastern brown tree creeper, as well as Sydney's last emus? Given your responsibilities under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, what is your department planning to do to prevent individual animal suffering as a result of the flooding of downstream habitat?
Mr President, I thank the honourable member for his question, and Mr President, I think it is a very long bow that the member is drawing to try and attach this question to my portfolio. Now, what the member is suggesting is that flooding events somehow then should be investigated and potentially prosecuted under the Prevention of the Cruelty to Animals Act that is administered by my agencies with the policy work, but also enforced by the police, the Animal Justice League and also the RSPCA. That is a long bow, Mr President. That is suggesting that natural events like flooding should be investigated by the RSPCA because it may endanger some native animals. That is what you are saying. That is what you are saying. That is absolutely ridiculous, Mr President. This is something that the member must have run out of ideas for the last week of Parliament, because surely he has got a lot more other areas that he could have been asking questions in relation to my portfolio matters, Mr President. This is a long bow at the very least. Mr President, I don't imagine that anyone that is in those agencies that enforces the POCTA Act would take seriously any suggestion that any flooding that would happen in the Hawkesbury Valley should warrant an investigation under the POCTA Act. So at this stage, Mr President, I'm quite happy to say I'm not aware of any work that my agency has done in relation to how this impacts on the POCTA side of my portfolio. The member did refer to the Office of Environment and Heritage. They are the agency that are responsible for maybe some of the animals in the national park, but when it comes to the cruelty of animals, that's when we flick over to the POCTA. So I don't think that there is anything that my agency could be doing at this stage, particularly because we're only talking about the environmental assessments of the impacts of potentially raising the dam wall at this stage. So, Mr President, I'm quite confident to suggest that, as far as I'm aware, that there isn't any work that's being undertaken by my agencies under the POCTA Act. I think that this is a very long bow. The question may have been better suited to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, because maybe OEH have looked at some of the impacts on some of our native wildlife.
No, I doubt that, Minister.
That may have been a better question, but the member has asked the question of me, and under the responsibility of the POCTA Act, and Mr President, I can say that I'm not aware of any work that's being done in this place, by my agencies in relation to this matter at this time.
Supplementary question, Mr President.
The Honourable Mike Pearson on supplementary.
Oh, supplementary, coming back from
Would the Minister please elucidate in how his portfolio of animal protection does not include the impacts upon wild animals when a government makes a decision to cause the flooding of an area which will impact those wild animals?
Native animals?
Point of order.
The Parliamentary Secretary on a point of order.
Mr President, the supplementary question asked by the Honourable Mike Pearson did not seek an elucidation of the Minister's answer, but rather was a new question directed to the line.
The Honourable Petty Sharp on the point of order.
I listened very carefully. There was in the Minister's answer, there was a discussion in relation to whether it was forced flooding or natural flooding, and I believe that Mr Pearson has actually asked for an elucidation in relation to that particular aspect of the minister's answer, and it is in order.
Very crafty member.
I'm going to allow the supplementary. Supplementary's in order.
That was a long way. Is it in order or out of order?
It's in order. You can answer it. Can I remind the minister he can answer it the way the minister...
Bit of a leg up there from Mr Penny.
Oh, thank you, Mr President.
You're welcome.
I see that all my answers are fit. Mr President, I thank the honourable member for the supplementary. And when we talk about flooding, whether it is as the result of someone's actions or
Order. Would the
inactions...
minister please resume his seat? Stop the clock. It has come to my attention for some time, and it's been remiss of me not to have indicated this earlier, so I will take the opportunity to do so now in these last few days. As honourable members are well aware, there have been past rulings by presidents which permit honourable members to read extracts from documents. That is well regarded. What is also well known is that honourable members are not permitted to use props in the chamber. Can I advise honourable members lifting a newspaper page and flashing it in the air and pointing to something on the page is not reading extracts from the paper, but is, in my view, using a prop. I will call members to order if they undertake such an action again. The minister has the call.
Mr President, I thank the honourable member for the supplementary question. Now, whether an animal is impacted from flooding either by an action or an inaction, I still don't see the correlation between that and the POCTA legislation. It's just like saying that if there is a fire that is lit and it gets out of control and animals are impacted, then the RSPCA should be out there investigating under their legislation and their jurisdiction to hold those account. Now, this is something that I would love to see. If the member has some legal advice that is contrary to my assessment of this, I'd love to see it. But I believe that the question should have been directed to the Office of Environment and Heritage. They are better placed to look at this, and through the assessment process of this project and the EIS, I'm sure that the impacts on wildlife, on Aboriginal cultural heritage, on a whole range of impacts on the national park will be looked at. But I don't believe that it belongs to be investigated under the POCTA Act. And as I said, if the member has anything that can convince me otherwise, I'd be more than happy to have a look at that. But as I stand here today, I don't have anything in any of the information that I have that suggests that is any different to what I've answered, and the member probably should have directed the question to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment.